So when COVID-19 first started, I'm in contact with a lot of elders like me that practice traditional learning and things like that. At the beginning, they called it the coronavirus. Remember that? Elders knew it was coming, and medicine people knew it was coming, and they said it was going to be in the air. So we knew that much about it. We didn't know what it would be during, and so even some of those elders that I was in contact are no longer with us because of the virus. They couldn't make it. When it first came out, we were all talking about, there was early hints of it out east, and then it got closer and closer to the Midwest where I am. And in talking about it, they said it was going to be in the air. They advised to take cedar, make a cedar tea, real strong tea, boil water, put cedar sprigs in it, and then go throughout your house and smudge the air, because that's where this virus was going to be airborne, and that's how it was going to spread. I did that right after reading that. I did that, for a couple weeks. They also talked about the jingle dress, the medicine dress, and that we would need to call to help that spirit too of the jingle dress. So that was, I went throughout the house because at the time my 10-year-old granddaughter lived with me and son. They lived with me, and I was so afraid that she was going to, get it. Plus, fear for my own self because I was a native elder. I was worried about that. And so I smudged the house, and like in the mornings, I would do that sprigs of cedar. And there's a lot of flat cedar here in Wisconsin. And go throughout the house and pray, along with, smudging and things like this. So, but this was kind of like that, to release those good spirits into the air. So I'd go throughout the house and smudge it, like with that cedar. I had Lisa, my granddaughter. She's a jingle dress dancer. I had her put on her regalia, and we went in the backyard. I live in a trailer court. And so we went in the backyard. And I found on my phone the best Northern Cree jingle dress song I could. Pumped it up as much as I could, and I had her dance. I didn't make a big fanfare. So often when you use medicine, you don't do that. It doesn't have to be a ceremony. It doesn't have to be involve any fanfare. It's just something that we should always practice in our daily lives, that spirituality. And I asked her to keep in mind, all the elders that may get sick, her dad and me and, Papa and, everybody in Kansas at home. I asked her to keep them in mind that this sickness that was coming wasn't going to hurt them. At the end of it, she stopped and turned it off, and we just stood there and, thought about everything. And my neighbors were going, "Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa." Because they knew that was going to be a blessing for my area where I live. What followed up was teachings using the medicine wheel. I call it the wheel of life because I use it when I mentor my students. And some of those parts of that, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual side of beings that are in ourselves. And what they had in it was some of the things that you could do, some of the self-care that you could use. You have those 4 parts of yourself. So like with the physical, which was really what was happening with this virus, people were getting sick. And so this is called self-care during the COVID-19 pandemic. And like on the physical, I'll just read some of them. The physical side, it suggested that we practice those safeguards like washing our hands, using the social distancing, water, water, stay hydrated, eat a good meal, and get enough sleep. And so those are some of the physical things. Some of the mental things that they had were like breathing, practice breathing. Also these parts, when I do my mentoring, they hook to an element. The physical element is earth. And so that's how you stay grounded. And that's why that's so important that, physically, being grounded to earth and how you're feeling, what you're eating, are you getting enough sleep, taking care of your body. If you do get sick, making sure that you go to the doctor. You don't try to self-medicate or ignore it and think that you've cured yourself because it might take a doctor's care. That's with the physical part. The mental part, that part is air. And I always say that, sometimes when how your mind is just going and you're thinking, oh, I gotta do this and I still gotta get this done, and and you just, or for my students, it's like schoolwork. They gotta, complete their schoolwork. And so that's really taxing on them. And so sometimes it asks you to, because the element of air, take some deep breaths, clear your mind and just, breathe in air, because that's a cleanser, especially for your brain, because you're using your brain in the mental part of it. So breathing in and getting that oxygen to your brains are good. So practice deep breathing. And they ask, another thing on it is meditation. And that's why I say just close, down all those thoughts that you're having. Don't even think about that test you got to take, and just sit there and let that oxygen kind of invigorate your brain. Establish a routine. And that's really important when you're using your mind so much that you have to be able just to do that, to think about something or to study something. And so you have to, create a routine. Okay, I'm going to study from 4 to 6, and no, I can't do any errands for you. And no, you're going to have to find your own ride, and things like that. So stick to a routine and make others aware of that routine and stick to it. The next one that I have is the spiritual side. And the spiritual side hooks to fire. And fire is a very, very powerful element. Fire can destroy, but fire also can restore. Sometimes then you see a burn out field stuff, and then right after, all the grasses come back and all of the, flowers pop up and everything, but fire is very, very powerful. That's why it hooks to the spiritual part of it. A lot of times we don't do that. We don't pray, we don't smudge, and that's some of the things that the spiritual side is. And it's even things like praying for your loved one, smudging. If you don't smudge, then, something that you do. Learn more about your culture. If you're tribal, learn a little bit about some of your ancestors. Another thing, and I agree with this completely, is call an elder. That's another important part. Call that auntie, call that grandma, call that Michelle, and, just make their day. You're going to make their day just by that call. The other thing is be in nature. And there's so many beautiful things to see here in Wisconsin. I mean, just water's abundant, and, and so always telling me, go outside and, look at the snow. Even though it snowed a lot, then look at the snow and see how it rests on the trees. Or, go when you're passing over the river there, just look out there and look at the river and see how the ice is, starting to break up and form on the river. So, be out in nature, notice nature. So that's the spiritual side. The last side that I have is the emotional side. The emotional side hooks to water, which is also powerful. But with water, it flows. It, continuously goes and, comes in. The moon, we're mostly water, and the moon controls the tide. So that's another, one of our parts of us is that, the lunar cycles and the full moon. That's really important to Native people. So the moon controls that one. We never think about that, So the emotional side, one of the big things that I use is that, hold space for your feelings. And that's your feelings and, that anger, that anxiety, that happiness. Those are all emotions, and because all emotions are acceptable. Don't beat yourself up because you get angry about something that's happened. Or, don't, maybe you're real happy that day. Don't let somebody who's grumpy that day bring you down and pull that happiness away. So those are some of the things with the emotional part. And it hooks to water because our emotions are always going and they're ebb and flow, and they're always moving, and we're always, sometimes we can go from one emotion to the next emotion in an instant. So there's no timeable on it. Some of the emotional things you can do is call a loved one. I always tell this to my students because with emotions, sometimes we don't remember why we were so mad that day. Write it in a journal because that cements it, that puts it down. And I'm not going to say that it puts it into it, but it gives it some concrete to look at, and say, oh yeah, I'm not doing that stupid thing anymore. I remember how much anxiety that caused me when I did that. So I'm not doing that dumb thing anymore, Another thing with emotion is like find laughter. Watch a funny movie, and that's so helpful. Plus, my kids used to tease me because I watch America's Funniest Videos. And they say, Mom, why do you watch America's Funniest Videos? That's so dumb, And I was like, because it makes me laugh. But I like to laugh. And you can't help but laugh at some of the things that happen on that show. So I do. I watch America's Funniest Videos just to, feel that gaiety in my life. Give a good release for them. Another thing is music. Listen to your favorite. That's a good tie to the emotional part of us. The wheel also teaches balance. Not one of these is more important than the other. They're all the same. Because that's us right there in the middle, and we want to achieve balance. And so that's another thing that how busy students are and people are, with jobs and things like that we forget sometimes ourselves, and we get off in one section. So we need to, help straight across from it, like the mental to the emotional. Those are its helpers. So sometimes if you're having, emotional trauma, you can always look and do some of the things that help you. Take a deep breath. Practice some deep breathing. I always teach them like 4 deep breaths, and then fire and physical, spiritual and physical. So right across from them, I teach them those. And that's all to help achieve balance.